Hola, Han, Bonjour, Sitahe, hello. My name is Sue Legatt, and welcome to the Central Minnesota Art Board's video on budget preparation for the project grant and public art grant applications. The goal of this video is to explain CMAB's process for preparing and submitting your budget, understanding expense eligibility, and how the required budget template works. I'd like to take a moment to thank the Minnesota State Arts Board, who allocates funding through a legislative appropriation from both the General Fund and the Arts and Cultural Legacy Amendment. CMAB is one of 11 regional arts councils throughout the state, and as Region 7W, we serve Benton, Sherburne, Stearns, and Wright counties. We also receive funding from the McKnight Foundation, who works to support Minnesota's artists and culture bearers to advance a more just, creative, and abundant future where people and planet thrive. The project grant and public art grant are both supported with legacy and state general funding. Both of these grant programs use the same system for submitting budgets to the application and final report. Aside from the required match, they also have the same criteria for expenses and revenue. This video will walk you through the process and everything you need to prepare and submit a clearly defined budget. We're going to start with the various expense categories. When preparing your budget, you'll need to include every expense related to the proposal, even expenses that CMAB funds cannot cover. Each expense will be listed as either a single line item or a category of items, depending on their complexity and importance. For example, if you were hosting a painting workshop, your materials such as brushes, paint, paper, scissors, etc., could be lumped together into a single line in the budget. However, something like the instructor's compensation would need to be its own line as it is unique and individually significant to the proposed effort. The first expense category is personnel. This is any individual related to the effort who is also compensated for their time. How you choose to pay this person is up to you, but it's usually either an hourly rate or a flat fee. If it is an hourly rate, you should include that formula in your budget, especially if there is one rate for preparation and research and a different rate for facilitation. Materials or supplies are any physical and consumable item that you need to complete the proposal. They should be dedicated to the proposal and not intended to remain with the organization afterwards. However, having leftover supplies after an effort is very common. It is okay and not something you would need to report. Equipment, however, is something intended to be more permanent and remain with the organization. It may be purchased for the proposed effort, but it could also be used for future programming. Equipment costs cannot exceed $4,999, as it would then be considered capital improvements. Only nonprofit arts organizations located in Region 7W are allowed to include equipment in their CMAB request. If you're not sure whether something is equipment or materials, please ask us for clarification. Publicity refers to any expense related to the promotion of your effort, including recruitment, attendance, and participation. Each type of promotion should have its own expense line. The other category is the go-to place for any expense that doesn't quite fit in another category, but is still important to your proposal. Other expenses include things like copyright permissions, facility rentals, and post-evaluation efforts. This is also a common area to list ineligible expenses such as food, travel, and housing. The last expense category is in-kind. This one's a little bit different because it is both an expense and a revenue and must be entered in both areas. In-kind is any non-financial contribution provided by a business or professional that would otherwise have monetary value. In-kind support must be verified in the final report with documents such as receipts, contracts, and invoices. For more information on in-kind support, please watch our in-kind video on YouTube. Revenue is any income dedicated to your proposed effort or generated because of it. Similar to expenses, there are different categories for you to report your revenue. You can itemize your revenue the same way you did your expenses, as you would if you had an angel donor who promised a significant financial contribution. Or you can lump revenue together as you would with anticipated cash donations on the day of your event. The same practice applies to something like ticket sales and participation fees. However, for this revenue source, you'll want to include the formula to explain the final amount. The first form of revenue is cash. This is probably the easiest category to explain, as it is exactly what it sounds like: financial resources that are already available through the organization's accounts, such as savings and checking. The next category is donations. For your proposed grant budget, you do not need to list all the donations your organization has received for general operations or other efforts. You do, however, need to list any donations that have been dedicated specifically to the proposed effort. Depending on the size or design of your effort, you may be seeking multiple grants. This is perfectly acceptable as long as you keep track of which grant paid for which expense. In your application budget, you will need to disclose any additional grants you are seeking or have already received that are specific to the proposal. Your previous grant was for operating expenses. You do not need to disclose it. However, any pending or received grants from the Minnesota State Arts Board that relate to your proposal must be disclosed. The last revenue category is earned income. This is any income that your proposed effort will generate, such as with ticket sales, participation fees, booth rentals, or advertising. These numbers could be an educated guess based on your research or what has already been confirmed through registration or contracts. The match is the required financial contribution to the project that you are prepared to make. It can come from existing finances like cash on hand, or it can come from generated revenue. Our project grant requires a 10% match, and the public art grant requires 25% of your total expenses. Your required match will be auto-calculated by the budget template. The budget template is an Excel file downloaded from the application. The various categories for expense and revenue are already included, and it will calculate your subtotals for each category, your overall expenses and revenue, and the required match. When you're in the application, you'll find the budget section towards the end. To download, click on its name as blue, shown here by the pink arrow. Remember to save your template as an Excel file on your computer so you can update it for the final report if you are funded. However, you'll need to save your file as a PDF to upload to the application, shown here with the yellow star. The other numbers you need for your application include your total in-kind contributions, shown next to the green heart, your total proposed expenses, shown by the blue cloud, and the total amount you are requesting from CMAB, shown with the purple lightning bolt. This is the budget template. For the proposed budget, there are 4 columns. The first, shown by the pink arrow, is the title area for your expense, such as your lead artist's name, the store where you purchase your supplies, or the company that will be printing your posters. The second column, shown by the yellow star, is for any details related to that expense. This could be a compensation formula or a breakdown of categorized items. The third line, under the green heart, is for the total amount on that expense line. And finally, under the blue cloud, is the portion of that expense line that will be covered by CMAB funds. If you are applying for the project grant, that number cannot exceed $9,000. In this example, the personnel section has various people or categories of people listed. Each expense has either a flat rate or a formula to explain the total amount. In the fourth column, this organization has chosen to spread out their grant funding across several expense categories. On the template, you'll see each expense category's subtotal in pale yellow boxes. The total expenses from all categories is at the bottom, in the green box indicated here with the green heart. The grand total for CMAB funding expenses is shown in the blue box, indicated here with a blue cloud. The lower portion of the spreadsheet is the revenue section. Once again, you'll add all possible revenue that either you are contributing or that the effort will generate. Once you start working on the budget template, you'll see that some boxes are locked and you cannot edit them. One example is in-kind in the revenue section. Since in-kind is both an expense and a revenue that cancel each other out, the budget template is set up to automatically copy in-kind listings, descriptions, and amounts from the expense section down to the revenue section. For this reason, you must enter in-kind in the expense section first. Each revenue category will calculate its total. Your effort does not need to generate revenue, but you must have enough to cover your required match. That number is shown near the bottom in the peach-colored box, indicated here with the pink arrow. At the very bottom of the template, you'll see all your numbers add up. The total proposed expenses in green will carry down from the expense section. Your project revenue will show up in yellow. The revenue will subtract itself from the expenses and show the remaining amount in blue. The CMAB funds you designated in the expense area will also copy down in blue. These two blue boxes must equal each other. Any budget included with an application is considered a proposed budget. It's not uncommon to have numbers change as you complete the project. However, large changes of $500 or more during your project, especially with CMAB funds, may require an amendment. It's always best to ask CMAB staff if you're not sure. If you're funded, keep track of your expenses and revenue. The final report for your completed project is due 60 days after the stated completion date. The report looks very similar to the application and uses the same budget template. In addition to your actual budget, you'll need to submit the total actual expenses and total actual in-kind with documentation. Issued through the grant system, the final report opens just like the application. Towards the end, you'll see an area to submit your final budget, shown here with a pink arrow. The final report will also ask for your total actual expenses, shown by the green heart, your total actual in-kind contributions, shown by the blue cloud, and next to the yellow star, in-kind documentation. This will need to be a single PDF with all receipts, invoices, or contracts related to your in-kind support. The final report page of the budget template is accessible by clicking on the tab labeled Final Report at the bottom of the Excel spreadsheet. In the final report template, the proposed numbers from your application will transfer over to the left or blue section shown here with pink arrows. The white fields in this section are locked and cannot be changed. The section to the right, the green section, is for your final or actual numbers. The column with the yellow star is for that expense line's actual amount. It may be the same as the proposed budget, but it may be different. The column with the blue cloud is for actual use of CMAB funds. These should not have changed without prior approval from CMAB. The peach-colored boxes, marked here with the green heart, are for any expense that was not in your proposed budget but was necessary to successfully complete the effort. The title and description of the expense would go on the left, and the actual numbers would go on the right. At the bottom of the expense section, you'll see your proposed totals and actual totals. The CMAB funds shown in blue or marked here with pink arrows must match. Your total proposed and actual expenses shown with yellow stars do not need to match. The revenue section of the final report budget is very similar. In this example, the organization sold fewer tickets than anticipated. Therefore, their actual revenue in the peach box next to the green heart is less than proposed. The template will automatically calculate the final numbers and for actual expense and actual revenue. The budget portion of the grant application is personally my least favorite part, but we're here to help you through the process. Whether it's related to a technical issue in the application, or a philosophical question around eligibility, or a problem with your final report, we would prefer to speak early when the challenge is still manageable. On behalf of everyone at CMAB, thank you for taking the time to watch. We hope this video helped you feel more prepared to submit budgets for the project and public art grant applications. We look forward to seeing those applications and your projects come to life.